Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video review from Fanboys Forever. And today we're going to be looking at some of the newest Masters Universe Origins figures. These have just come out and have just been stocked here in the US and some online retailers such as Target and Amazon if you can catch them. There's Clawful and there's Anti-Eternia He-Man. Of course, we'll be looking at each one of them separately. If you're wondering where the Horde Trooper review is at, which also dropped around this time, I had just done that review here on my channel. So be sure to look at that, as that was kind of a longer review, as I had a lot of thoughts on that individual release. Let's go ahead and start with Clawful. Clawful comes in the standard packaging that we've all come to expect from the line. It says that he's a warrior with a grip of evil. Oh, the grip of evil, that must be a tough grip. Make his dreadful claw grab and hold, and here he is looking pretty deranged. And you can see the comic in the back. You can see some directions about his action feature. Work the lever, make the claw grab, press the mace into the claw, twist into powerful battle positions. You get the gist. And it's always worth talking about the spectacular artwork. Just another beautiful painted piece here. And of course we can see Whiplash in the background, so that's something to be excited about as well. Clawful's crushing brutality and cunning intellect makes him one of He-Man's more vicious enemies. And of course we have our barcode down here if this helps you. Let's go ahead and get him out of the package. As always, we get a handy little guide for what parts you can and cannot remove from the figure, as these figures are modular. You also get this same mini comic with both figures we'll be looking at today. This one has a great focus on Sunman, and of course we also see a lot of Anti-Eternia He-Man and Clawful in it, so it's probably much more about Anti-Eternia He-Man than anything, honestly, but it's a great little read. First things first, let's check out the sculpting on this guy. You can see that everything is pretty well as you would remember it from the original toy. We can see our head up here, and we might as well talk about it just right away. The eyes are pretty unevenly applied, and that's going to be an issue that we see with this guy across the board. We know that it's not just Mattel, it's McFarlane and a whole bunch of other action figure companies, Hasbro at times. Everybody's struggling to get eye applications right, and this is no exception. This definitely looks more like he's been jostled a little bit or maybe hit over the head by He-Man, with this eye slightly more up, this eye slightly more down. Now the problem here is that even the tiniest, it's not even that horrible really with the difference between them, but your brain can point those out right away. You can instantly see it, at least I can. And so it makes getting good eye paint really difficult for me, and I do have some slightly OCD tendencies about that. So that's unfortunate. It may be the kind of thing where you just have to hunt down the best paint sample. I, of course, blind bought this from Target. Moving on down, you have this cool chest armor, which is the first we've seen of it in this line. It feels a little more soft and a little more malleable than what we usually see in the line. Usually they're a little stiff, so it's nice to have something a little more flexible, and it kind of encourages you to take it off and switch it around with other figures. On the back, you can see he kind of has his fin going. There's the red furry shorts and the blue belt, and then his blue monster feet. So I think visually the colors are all just coming together. The claws are one of the main attractions, of course, for Clawful, and I'm very, very impressed by all the little tiny barnacles and just the cool texture that they have on the claw. And there's been a lot of love and care put into this to make sure that it looks good and looks appropriately crustacean. Not only that, but with this lever, this action feature is just terrific. It has a pretty decent grip too. You see a Horde bow laying around. He can grab onto it and he holds pretty well. So it's very possible to hold something with it, but it kind of leads to some awkward fits sometimes, like he would have to almost take it like this so that he could fire it, but it still works. So I think the claw is strong enough, but you're not going to get like anything crazy with it. If you're big on dynamic poses with your figures like I am, you may be wondering if it's possible to hold another figure, say, by the neck with it. And you pretty well can. I honestly expected this to just be a funny segment in the video. I thought, okay, well, we're going to do this and it'll fall over and I'll say, see, you can't do it. But no, he can actually do it. So that's pretty cool. Now his arm won't hold the weight, so the joint you can see of the elbow, it keeps just flopping down. But honestly, if you had something to prop up this arm, it would work to an extent, but as you can see, it does fall out once it gets jostled. Maybe, perhaps, you could hold a figure by the foot even if you had it just right, and you can see that that too is possible. So you definitely have some options here with your displays. It might be easier just to kind of have him balance on the ground like that and kind of fake it a little bit, but he can hold the weight, so color me impressed. The mace is really nothing to write home about. It's probably not something that many people even care that much about, seeing as how Clawful's gimmick is, the claw. He's not maceful, so it's definitely something that's just kind of there. because it was with the original figure. All right, we do have some articulation, which will pretty well be the same for both figures. The head has a lot of range, even more probably than Anti-Eternia He-Man does. You can get way up, way down, so that's due to him having such a small head, I think. You can turn the waist like this. You can, of course, bring the arm up. It's exactly what you expect. You can bring it up this way. You can go around at the elbow. You can also have a single joint hinge right there, and it works pretty well even with the giant claw. The claw can spin, and of course you can open it over here. Over here, this one just rotates side to side. All the accessories are shoved back into this more circular area so that they can clamp on. Down here, he can do sort of the splits, just as you would expect with this body. Putting his leg up, he can do a pretty good kick. He does have a single jointed hinge right there at the knee, but it's very effective. You can also rotate right there if you wish. There is a hinge at the ankle. There is a really nice ankle pivot down here, and there is a boot cut. So he does have all of the standard articulation that we've come to expect from the line. Again, I really do like the head sculpt, but the eye paint makes it even goofier than it already is. And something that I've always noticed about Clawful is whenever they decide to do the tiny little pupils on the eyes, it has the effect of making him look much less vicious and much more stupid. There's something that just makes him seem a little more absent-minded when they do it like this. So in that, with the uneven application, kind of causes everything to get a little iffy. Overall, Clawful is exactly what you would expect him to be. He does know more than he has to. I am glad that the action feature works as well as it does, and I think he'll be a great addition to anybody who wants to complete those vintage villains. Next up, we'll be looking at Anti-Eternia He-Man. Now, he is actually a character from like a kid's audio tape that you could get in the 80s. I believe that it was a German audio play. The whole deal with him is that he's known as the most evil man in the universe because he comes from this alternate reality where He-Man is completely evil, and they really do a good job of getting into it in this comic back here. I don't know a whole lot about that original audio story, so I'm not sure how closely it follows it. On the back, we get into some heavy stuff. It says, with the power of Hell's Skull, the fearsome He-Man overthrew Anti-Eternia using his unmatched strength. So it's kind of horrifying, particularly the name of where he draws his power from. It all kind of leads to a much darker feel, and we've never quite had anything like this within the line before. Even the comic itself, a lot more violent than what we're used to with these, which have always kind of carried a little bit edgier Filmation vibe, but this kind of goes over the top. Just showing you some of his poses. He doesn't necessarily have an action feature per se. There's the other figures on the back. Here is the barcode for anyone who needs it. Let's free the most evil man in the universe, even though we probably shouldn't. And here he is out of the packaging. Now, delving into his history just a little bit, this character never had an actual vintage release, so this is one of those kind of updated concepts that's based on something from back in the day. Never got a figure in that original line. Since then, it actually has had several releases other ways, most notably in Masters of the Universe Classics, which we'll look at later. Let's go ahead and check them out. So first off, you can see that this is your standard vintage style He-Man sculpt. It's exactly what you expect. The head sculpt is that same vintage style one that we've been seeing. It's not the mini comic styled one. Might be an interesting avenue for them to go down later to do a version, but it's definitely something that I think folks are going to be glad to have a vintage version of. Looking at the head, we can definitely tell that it's that original vintage style of the head and not that more mini comics inspired He-Man head that we started the line with. All the applications are pretty well even, I think, and it looks really nice. I think that this visual is very striking to have an all like completely jet black He-Man with the glowing eyes and more of the red hair. But I think the real magic of the design comes from the color choices on the harness, the bands, the belt, and the shield. I really love those red highlights. And of course we have the fur and the boots, and they're done in more of that same burgundy that the hair is. I'm really also liking this black power sword that he gets, which is really nice. Kind of reminds me of the one that we got with Wundar, the proto He-Man that was based on that mail-away looking figure. I think that it looks really cool. The shield is just your basic sculpting that we've seen before. On the back, he even gets his classic axe, and you can see the paint details continue with the red squares just going all the way to the back as well. I think it'll be interesting to see what the regular He-Man looks like with this harness on, and of course all that stuff is interchangeable. The articulation is pretty well exactly the same as Clawful because this is the same body. You're not going to get maybe the extreme amount of posability from the head because Clawful's head was so small, but you still get quite a bit of good range. One thing I wish that they would spring for with these He-Man releases is maybe a couple of alternative hands of some sort, because they are interchangeable. To me, I think that would be very useful, because you can see that when you take this shield off, He-Man has a less useful kind of open hand here, but at least the fingers aren't mangled. That happens a lot with these releases, so that's good, but it's kind of just more like a pushing hand or a waving to your Anti-Eternia buddy's hand. So you can't really hold anything in it, and I think it would be nice if you got just like a fisted hand or a gripping hand. Just so that everybody can see, there is some storage back here on the back of the harness. You can actually take the power sword and put it in there. So there you go. There's not really enough room to comfortably put both, so you sort of have to pick which one he's holding and which one he's storing. And he has his power axe here, which is just done in straight up black plastic. I think with either one it looks good. I do think that with the axe, he looks a little more vicious, and I definitely think that that's what this version of the character is. It might be how I keep him in the display. You never know. I suppose the only problem mine has is a little bit of red paint slop that I could easily remove right there in the arm. Almost looks like a little bit of battle damage. I don't really care. You can easily wipe it off. Let's do the obvious comparison with his Masters of the Universe Classics counterpart. Of course, in concept, they're exactly the same thing. Even the eye applications are incredibly similar, with there being a little bit of red under the eyes and then a white center. The hair is very similar. This has kind of a black wash to it. This doesn't. But the colors that they chose are almost exactly the same. Where the decisions really vary is Mattel chose to use more of a bright red on the belt, the harness, and the armbands, whereas with this Classics version, they went with a much more muted color tone, make it a little more dark and gritty, I suppose. That must have been what the Horsemen were going for. And of course, they have the added little details of having those rivets kind of in the belt with a darker version of the red. They also chose to have the boots be black here, and the furry underwear to just be black as well. Honestly, not very many times can I say this, but I actually think that this one is the more visually appealing option. I really do like the Classics version, and it has a great look to it, just like, well, pretty much any Classics figure that I own. But I think that the more vivid reds prove that that would have been a better direction to have gone in for that original release. I still love seeing them both together, and I think they're both really legitimate versions of this character. It's just so great that they went to such an obscure place, and it being an obvious repaint of He-Man, it's a very cost-effective direction for Mattel to go in, no matter what the line is. Overall, I do think that you'll want to be picking up Anti-Eternia He-Man. He's something that just is visually striking to me, and there's something about putting He-Man in this color scheme that instantly makes him sort of horrifying, especially after you read that mini-comic, where they do make him out to be a real, legitimate killer of a threat. I do think that increases his desirability quite a bit as something you're going to want to add to your collection. Alright friends, that'll do it for my review of these two. I know that there is one more figure in this wave aside from the Horde Trooper that I reviewed separately, and these two guys, and that's Sunman. Now what's interesting is that it appears Mattel has decided to kind of hold off Sunman for just a little while, but apparently the people who ordered him from Mattel Creations are supposed to be getting him fairly soon, and I'm one of those people. So I'm really hoping that that comes to fruition soon. It definitely didn't take any time at all to get this wave of Masters figures versus the last wave. Last wave seemed like it was just delayed forever, probably pandemic related. But of course, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can see a review the second that I get my Sunman in from Mattel Creations. And be sure to like the video as well if you have enjoyed it. It really does help YouTube to share the video out so that more fans can check us out here on Fanboys Forever. And of course, it helps the channel grow, which we do appreciate a lot. And we thank you for watching the video. As always, God bless you and yours. I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.